Pretty good.
But I have to tell you a secret. When I was in high school, I was part of a string quartet, a cello, and violin, and guitar, and everybody was playing. And, you know, they decided that they were going to sing. We started singing, and he looked at me and says, I tell you what, we'll sing, you play. And when I hear voices that are so beautiful, I just admire that people do have a voice that is given by God to sing. Thank you. You know, have you ever thought that everything is created by God? There was a class one time and one said, yes, everything is created by God. Another student asked, well, if everything is created by God, oh, he must have created evil. Okay. Another student said, ask permission, may I ask you? Maybe it's a foolish question, Professor. Does cold exist? Well, of course cold exists. Go to the freezer and wherever you shop. I carry a sweatshirt with me when I go to some grocery stores because it's cold in there. According to the laws of what we consider cold, it's actually the absence of heat. We are created cold when there is no heat. Anybody just shiver sometimes because you're so cold? You're lacking heat. Does darkness exist? Well, Prof says, of course darkness exists. So what's missing? Light. I experienced that once with one of my children. Her name was Lacey. We went into this cave, the Monarch Cave, and the fellow taking us on tour said, it's going to be very dark. And he turned out all the lights. Total darkness. And my daughter went into my shoulder and just screamed. So what does darkness need? Light. And when they turned the light on, everybody just said, oh, thank you. That was it. If you look back at Jonah's story, that really can challenge us with what we perceive evil is. He called Jonah to the people of Nineveh, and they were wicked. It's about punishment. I'm going to punish them if they don't behave. I'm going to get them. But they listened to Jonah, and guess what? They behaved. Well, now, can you imagine going and telling somebody, you ought to behave differently? How successful have you been? Anybody been very successful to keep that going and keep that going? Well, let's see how God reacts. Jonah complained and complained and complained. And they repented, and Jonah says, you're ridiculous. He was angry, and he says, of course I have the right to be angry. Isn't it okay to get angry at those that kill, rob? You know, there's a lot of broken people in the world. Turn on the TV. Turn on, and I hate to listen to the news a lot because I don't know whether it's true or false or what I'm getting. But there's so much disruption in the world. And I think Jonah says, I think they ought to get their comeuppance. They need to be eliminated. Well, God said, they're human beings made in God's image, but they're lost and broken. What they need is compassion and understanding. Now, try to unpack that in the world today. Where does that settle in our hearts, in our minds? God's challenge. Jonah considered the hard truth that even his worst enemies just might be loved by God. And I think God weeps. I think Jesus weeps. Jesus showed emotions. If you go through scriptures, you can see that. And I think he has a great sorrow for so many, so many. Should God not care for those they own? We do have the right to challenge wrongdoing, but when we hold on to grudges, lack of forgiveness, how does that sit with our soul? Does your soul focus on the evil, or does it search the good to spread? That's a hard one sometimes. Think about the missionaries that go to different lands. That's a hard one. To love with compassion those you think are totally different in their thought pattern and the way they live their life. How do we resolve that with that lack of compassion and grace that is some? When you think about evil, what takes evil away? Heat takes cold away. Darkness, the absence of light. Forgiveness, the lack of compassion to those that have truly harmed you and wounded you and have left you packed with unforgiveness. What does that do to your soul? Well, Jonah got really ticked off. But didn't God have compassion on him? Mercy, grace. That's a hard one in this world, and I will admit that. It's a hard one for me to see and turn on the news and see the ugliness, the lack of forgiveness. Well, I got bigger guns than you, so. Ever played King on the Hill? Yep. Yeah. The strongest one. Either the one that snuck behind and just knocked you off your hip. Well, I'm better than they are because I won. Hold that thought. That's a big order. You know, referring back to children's moment, I did not get to go swimming that day. And I was still ticked at the end of the day. But after a while, it kind of went away because I had lots of time to go swimming and lots of times. But, you know, at first, Jonah rejected his divine mission first, refusing to preach God's mercy to Nineveh, the capital of Assyria and Israel, an ancient way. Could that possibly be going on today? How do you wrap your mind around that? Where do you go for peace and comfort? That's a big question today. When you see what you do not wish to see, when you see the enemy coming, what do you see? Now here's one. He got swallowed up by a great fish. My daughter and I, who's now, well, she's in her 50s now, we were having a discussion about that fish. And I said, do you think that was really real? Or do you think that was a story to tell Jonah, time out, you need to rethink this? And she just kind of looked at me, and then several weeks later, do you remember the news story about the man that was gobbled up by a whale? It was on the news. And she says, see, it could have really happened. Jonah could have sat in the whale for 3 days. And I'm like, well, maybe Jonah just needed a timeout. Have you ever had a timeout? Maybe Mom gave it to you. I know ever having the girls. There were quite a few timeouts. And I've noticed that girls act differently than boys. Boys just get on with it and get it over. Girls, and she did that, and she did that. So there's quite a bit of timeout. Then he obeys. But he still pouts a little bit. So, I don't know if any of you are pouting. It's okay. Maybe you just need a timeout to think about it. Oh, you're pouting.
Did I say something?
Yes.
I put my daughter in timeout one time and forgot. She's had her little fingers up under the door. Oh, Sam, can I come out? She was hungry. I don't think she's ever forgiven me.
I know. Well, you know, this is a little sidebar. I gave one of my girls a timeout, and it was a time whenever I went somewhere, my ankles cracked. Crack, crack, crack. They don't do that anymore, but they just cracked wherever I went. And only a month ago, we were talking about my ankles cracking as we went down the hallway, because they were in timeout. And she said, Mom, I found out that the Easter Bunny wasn't real, because you were coming down the hallway, cracking away with the Easter baskets that we were going to get for Easter. And she said, I never told you that before, but that's how I found out there's no Easter Bunny. So, you know, sometimes we have lots of experience with children. Most of them are good. The story of Jonah is told so many times. The reluctant prophet. He's mean-spirited even at times. He refuses to obey when his enemies repent and God shows mercy to them. You know, we have a jail ministry where I usually attend church. It's called the Jail Coalition. And there's letters of hope that we are assigned to write to prisoners in jail, in prison. Every month we gather and talk about the life. Sometimes we get a reply, sometimes we do not. But we try to show compassion to them. Right now I'm writing to a lady that's been in jail for 30-some years. She was convicted of robbery and murder. She has spent her whole life. She was 31 and she is now 65. I wonder sometimes during that time if anybody has some compassion for her. I'm sure being in Marysville for 30-some years has not been easy. How do we have compassion for those that we really feel have done so much harm to another? Now I've got another thought here. What if Christians in the United States were sent a Buddhist prophet who lamented our presence, insisted on all the right to manufacture arms, millions of nuclear weapons, war policies, and it'll be over in 40 days? What if we got a message like that? Where's that going to fit in your soul? I'm not saying that's true, but what if? What if? Jonah's story breaks all the expectations of who is right and remarks about the exclamation of grace. At Grace also, where I attend most of the time, we're doing a study on different religions. It gives us insight to their thinking, feeling, thoughts, reaching out. One of the studies is Islam in Iran, another Buddhism, Hinduism. You know how different all those people are in their thoughts, belief, and also the heritage that they have been introduced to over, shall we say, thousands of years. How do you accommodate that? Also, in our Christian, I'll share another experience that I had with you. I go swimming when I can. And I was swimming, and it's at Troy, and it's a warm pool. I don't get in cold pool, because it doesn't have heat. It's a very warm pool, but I was discussing, we were both retired, and I was just discussing, you know, where we were and what we did, and I'm not going to mention the denomination he was with, but he was just talking about different things that had happened in his life, and I told him I was a retired pastor, and immediately said, then you know all those gays are going to hell. And I'm like, I'm usually not speechless. I was speechless. And he swam away. Every once in a while I sing. Haven't been there for quite, haven't been there all summer now, but I just realized different people are taught different things, and are you going to be a negotiator for peace, or are you going to condemn? On what side of the fence do you condemn? Now, it's right to disagree. It's okay to think different thoughts. But do you condemn some of God's people because of that? Last Wednesday, I had a very interesting experience. We had a woman that was an Islam presenter. Her name was, and I hope I don't mess it up, Bushra Shapak, and talked about her community. And we have started an interfaith women's meeting to gather and share our faith journeys. How we think. There's no judgment in the midst of this. There's no lack of compassion in the midst of this. And there's some Jews that are there, some Catholics. All faiths and religions are welcome to our gathering. But I must tell you, the biggest topic is food. We decide how our culture represents our food. And I think the next meeting, I'm going to bring cannolis. Anybody not know what cannolis are? It was a German tradition in my family that every Christmas we had cannolis. So, I will explain my heritage, where I came from. You know, I've kind of wandered around different faiths. I think I grew up orphan, but you'll have to forgive me. I did not like the pastor. He made you write scripture 10 times if you couldn't remember it. And the Lord's Prayer was a real biggie for me. And I didn't like it. So as I got older, I got involved with it. My husband Carl was Catholic. So I got involved in Catholicism. And actually I taught in the Catholic schools for 8 years. And that was a different experience for the nuns, but I gotta tell you, these nuns were a hoot. Anybody know what a clicker is? They click, 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 and you better respond, and then we'd go into church and we'd sit down, click, we'd genuflect and go and sit down. But one experience, I was probably 22 at the time, a little naive about a lot of things because I was just learning different things about the Catholic faith. One thing about the Catholic faith that I remember is going to confession. Now, a lot of people say, you can talk to God, that's fine. But when you go into the confessional and you verbalize what you feel you have not done well, shall we say. There's never a judgment. There was never any, oh, you're a terrible person. He just gave you prayers to say. And you spent that time at the altar kneeling and saying those prayers. It gave me great peace at that time. How I ended up as a Methodist pastor, I have no clue. God just opened the doors and he goes, okay, this sounds good. But I don't even want to go in there. But I want to tell you something about these nuns. It was Christmas, and we didn't know what to give them. You know, nuns don't need anything. So there were about 7 or 8 of them in the school where I taught. So they decided that I needed to get them a birthday gift, or a Christmas gift. And they said, one of this other teacher, she was a lay teacher, she said, you know, a gallon of whiskey. And I went, okay. So I got him a gallon of whiskey. I wrapped it up in the prettiest package I could do. And we sat down and we opened it up. And of course they were like, but they very kindly said thank you. After Christmas, the new year, I got a letter. And they said, thank you very much for the gift you have given us for Christmas. We don't usually buy, but you know, so many of us had the sniffles and runny nose. We just needed a hot toddy. And I thought, oh, I'd love to have been there. But you know, sometimes we forget the deep roots from where people come, and the way they think, and the way they look at others. You know, it's hard for us. Sometimes we look at the world. How many of you used to play with one of those tops that just spun? Anybody remembers tops that spin, they go around in circles and then they fall over? To me, that's what the earth, the people, the country, civilization is kind of doing right now. We're spinning like tops, not knowing what to grab onto, what to believe. Some of the things that we believe, are they true, are they not true? It's very confusing to me. And I assume, I try not to make too many assumptions, it can be very confusing to you and young people as they grow up in a world with all of the electronics, all of the messages, all of the, how do you decipher? Remember, compassion, grace. But you have to understand the people that you are giving compassion and grace to. You don't have to agree with what they do. I've had a lot of support groups. I used to do a lot for AA, Al-Anon. I've had eating disorder groups. And that was more my go-to as a Methodist pastor. Even financial aid. What do you do with people that have come from different paths and you see the possibility for those as they travel here on earth? The stories you hear are almost unbelievable. Visited women's shelter. Not a good place to be. Sometimes the leaders even have trouble with compassion because it happens over and over. So look to see where compassion is needed. I know my husband Tony spent a lot of time at the VA hospital before he passed away. The compassion of his doctor was unbelievable. And I shared with you the compassion of the new doctor that I just went to see. How do you accommodate all of this? My mind spins. Where do I go? What do I do? The only thing I know is I can help those or listen to those that are right in front of me. trying to listen, trying to understand. United Women in Faith has given much opportunity in a small way compared to the rest of the world. So as you travel in the world, you will see people, people begging at the street corners. And my young grandson, who now turned 19, just got his paramedic license, wants to be a firefighter. He says, I can't sit in an office all day. Highly intelligent young man. Could probably do almost anything he wanted. But he says, Grandma, what I do in the wintertime, I get a blanket and I wrap it up in the back of my car. I put a hat in there, socks, and I give it to people on the corner that are cold. I did that once, and I was so the look of thankfulness on a man that was very, very poor, probably 6'6", skinny as a rail, was so thankful just to get a blanket. You will run into the people like that. I've had discussions with the police officers who can't tell you of some of the things that I've done. I won't go into some of the discussions with young people. But I have called the police to help someone. You need to do that safely. So as you leave today to go out of church, there's someone you're going to run into. Someone's not quite doing what you think they ought to do, or doing what you know is best. Just thank them, and perhaps a touch of compassion and grace. Thank you for your listening. And if you've got any advice for me, I would truly like to hear it. I think. And may the Lord as you journey here on earth. And take the time to look, to see who just might be in your presence. I would like to end with this prayer. It's kind of maybe a little bit of a difference. I don't know, can you see it? You got it? Okay, it's kind of a version of the Lord's Prayer. You know, how many times do you say a prayer, and you're done? Now, what did you say? It's just repetition, and it doesn't get to the heart, the head, the soul. So let's try this one. As we want to join together. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us